Today, we're making Big Daddy's world famous meatballs. And we're gonna start with cutting up the Italian parsley. You get a bunch of parsley from the grocery store. We have some basil here, some fresh sage, and some organic sage, and some oregano. Some of this is gonna go into the sauce or gravy, whatever you call it, and most of it are about half of it's gonna go into the meatballs. All of the sage is in the meatballs, and the oregano is basically 80% in the meatballs. Now we've got fresh tomatoes and a lot of fresh ingredients because it's September and the tomatoes are in. So we're gonna cut all the stems off, and we're not going to chop it fine because we wanna see the leaves, the nice leaves in the meatballs. It's gonna have a wonderful taste. All of this is, I'll probably throw a little bit in the sauce, but basically all of this is going in the meatballs. Not too thin. And this is for 3 pounds of meat. A mixture of veal, pork, and beef. Now you don't want to put a lot of sage in the beef and veal meatballs, but you want to cut it up fine, and it gives it a nice Italian authentic flavor. The Italians put sage in a lot of dishes, and it really gives it a unique taste that you can't quite identify what it is, but you really got to chop this up finely and then put a little organic sage in with it. As you can see, I got it really pretty finely cut. And then I'm going to sprinkle it's probably a little over a heaping tablespoon, and this will impart a lot of flavor, and it won't make it taste like Thanksgiving. It just gives it a good Italian unique flavor. Now I've got the fresh tomatoes. I got about a dozen tomatoes in this pasta cooker that I'm using as a steamer because it has a double layer. And the water goes underneath. I started with hot water, and it's just gonna steam the tomatoes so we can pull the skins off and use one of the tomatoes in the meatballs. We'll break it up. I'll show you how that's done. And the rest of them is gonna be the basis of our sauce, fresh tomato sauce. Okay, now this is the basil. We're gonna cut this up rather fine. And most of it's going to go into the sauce as we cook it, and some of it is going to go in for sweetness in Big Daddy's meatballs. Okay, this is the oregano, and we're going to get this rather fine. It's always good to listen to some Louis Prima, a little Frank Sinatra, or Dean Martin. It makes everything taste better. Okay, the tomatoes, about 15 minutes. You can see the skin is all wrinkled, breaking up. It's ready to peel off. I'm not going to do it until they're cool. I'm going to put them over in the sink and run a little cold water on them and let them sit. We don't need those peeled for quite a while, so we'll let them cool off. You could even do this a lot earlier. Okay, we use a lot of onion. I'm going to put 2 good sized onions, or 1 big and 2 average size. So that's a good sized onion. And we're going to use most of it in the meatballs, and we're going to use some of it in the sauce because it's going to sweeten both of them up. Now you want to cut it small because at first it'll impart more flavors, get your oils running, and that's the way to go. And you really want to cut these thin, and then you want to cut them and then cut them again and get everything thin, and you're going to end up with a huge pile. And you're going to say, what am I going to do with all those? You're going to use them. That's what you're going to do. As you can tell, I know how to cook, but I'm not a master cutter. So this is a 5-cup container, and it's probably got about almost 4, if not 4 cups of onion. And now I'm cutting up the garlic. Garlic, I use it by taste, sight. I like a lot of garlic because I'm putting a lot of garlic in my meat. And now this is a 3 blend: veal, pork, and beef. And I got it pre-blended. They probably cheaped out a little bit on the veal, but so do I. So here you go. We've got everything together. We're going to start putting it together and making the meat the balls. Time for a little Frank Sinatra, and to start the meat. I usually use at least a half a container, and I probably will add a little more. Italian breadcrumbs, Progresso's fine. It gives it consistency, keeps it together. I'll put 2 eggs in. If someone allergic to eggs was going to be eating, but she's not in town, I would use a little more olive oil than I use to hold it all together. I'm going to put a little olive oil in. Like I use a little less. Onions. Keep some out for the sauce. And I'm going to keep some of the garlic out. Putting a lot of garlic in there. It's to taste. You could get pre-squished garlic smashed up for you. And now we're going to use Parm cheese. Any Parm cheese will do. You don't need to use the great cheese here. I've got the Parmigiano Reggiano that we're going to put on the finished product. But that's about a cup. And we're listening to my way because this is my way and it could be your way. Okay, I got this mixed up pretty good without the herbs in it. Now I've got San Marzano organic tomatoes. They're the best canned tomatoes you can get. I don't care what anybody says. Now what you do is you put your finger in one, let the juice run out. I'm going to use that later. And squeeze it through your hand. Get a bunch of pieces. bunch of pieces and squeeze it into the meatballs. And you want to get pretty much the tomato tissues, the actual tomato meat. I'm going to squeeze in 3, and then I'm going to mix it up to try to get a good consistency. You want to get a little bit of tomato in each meatball. Yep, and I'm going to put a couple more in here. I got about 7 of these little canned tomatoes, sear marzano, and that is more than enough now. Nobody makes meatballs like these, but Big Daddy, and maybe you. Oregano, save a little. The basil, put a little. Save a lot. The parsley, save a little. And the sage. I'm going to put the sage in after I mix all this in. Okay, so this is what it looks like. I put the rest of the parsley in. It looked like by eye a little too much, but it wasn't. This is all mixed in very good. Okay, now I'm going to put the sage in, and I'm going to sprinkle it all over, and I'm going to rub it in. Flip it over. And I'm going to put some more on the other side. Buonasera, signorita. Buonasera, signorita. All right, then you give it a good workout. I'm gonna put a little more cheese in here too. Now comes the wine. Señorita, this is about a cup. This is how Italians measure. Italian men, anyway. And mix it all in. Yummy, yummy. I'm gonna probably put half a cup of breadcrumbs in there, thicken it up, get it right, and then we're ready to go. Okay, so now we're gonna peel the tomatoes. Most of the skin should come off, except around the stem. And then you gotta cut that out. I usually cut it out with the device that grabs and pulls. Okay. Drop it in. Go to the next one. This will make your sauce or gravy, whatever you call it. I think more Sicilians call it gravy, and I'm not, so I call it sauce. And you got to be careful you get all the stem out, and you save the tomato, and you're going to cook these down, and it's going to complement Big Daddy's meatballs. People are like, what's the secret to good food? Well, it's threefold. The best and freshest ingredients, the work that you put into it, and beyond that, if you know the best ingredients and the work, you need a cook who's not a complete moron, and then you can get it done. People say the Japanese take the best foods from around the world and make them better. Well, believe me, that didn't start with the Japanese, quite frankly, until America was discovered. The Irish never had doggone potato, and the Italians never had a red sauce. Never had a tomato. And believe me, they make the best tomatoes now, the San Marzanos, and they make the best pastas. Come here, kid. I'm going to show you how to make a pasta for a bunch of guys. Well, guys and gals, actually. And if you're gonna pick up some dessert, I always recommend cannolis from an Italian bakery. And you always get the cannoli and you leave the gun. Then you need to break the tomatoes up. You can use a device to do this, but you don't want to break them up too small. You want them to cook down, and they will melt. And so you just need to get them on their way. And we're going to add a crushed tomato in with this, as this will cook down. We'll start it with the garlic and the spices, and we'll allow it to cook down. And we're on our way. The easiest way to make the meatballs is to form them as you go. Get a bunch of them in your workstation and throw them in here in an oven that's preheated to 350. And you want to get them browned up. And then you want to get your sauce going. You want to put them in your sauce. You want to put them in your sauce that you'll have cooking in here to finish sucking the rest of the sweet juices out and imparting the flavor into the sauce. Now, noodles, you can use any noodles you want. This is going to be a thicker, more traditional Italian sauce. And therefore, we're not going to use the thin angel hair noodle, and we're going to mix a couple noodles, which I love to do. We're going to get some wide noodles. I love the wide noodles. I love pappardelle as well. And we're going to put some spinach noodles in there as well. So we're getting ready to get it all going. Now we're going to olive oil a little bit in the bottom of each one, and then the meat juices will soak out as you cook these, about 60% cooked. And I usually we're probably looking at about 15 minutes. 15 minutes cook time. in the oven, maybe 18, depending on what they look like. You want to get a little browning on it, and then you want to get it and dump it in, start the next batch. So here we go. Okay, so what we're gonna do, the simple way of doing it is dip a little oil and get it in each one. Now, a lot of people want to use a scooper that might be easier until you get the Italian eye. And when you get the Italian eye, you know how big you want your meatball. And I recommend a lot of meatballs that are smaller and still made tight. You gotta get them tight, make them small, and you get more. And then you could just spread them on bread, Italian bread too, and have Italian sandwiches. So that's how you do it. So we'll start. Making them up. Our oven's getting preheated. It's probably close to preheated. They don't have to be uniform. They're meatballs. Okay, we've got ready to go. 2 dozen going in the oven right now. Okay, these are browned up pretty good. I left them in a little bit longer. I still have the other one in. These are going in next. And I'm pulling the other one out. I'm gonna let the sauce cook up a little more, and I'm gonna start throwing the meatballs in. These are ready to go in. Okay, the meatballs are in. You put them in gently, and you stir gently. Otherwise, you're gonna end up with smashed, broken up meatballs. So, and these will cook very nicely, and you'll get a little bit of the meat juice in the sauce. Not too much. It won't be greasy. Sounds good, smelling good. Now I'm gonna put wine in it. Okay, now I'm getting ahead of the ball game here, and I'm going to start grating the cheese. This is the way to do it. It's the only way to do it. Grate it freshly, and I'm using Parmigiano Reggiano, which can only be imported from Italy. Otherwise, it's not Parmigiano Reggiano. If you want to put some other cheese in there, just go ahead and ruin it all. If you want to mix another imported cheese into it, I put a little fontanella in it as well. It's very nice, and it's going to be mostly the Parmigiano Reggiano with a little bit of sharpness, additional sharpness from the fontanella. Okay, these pastas cook in the same amount of time, so I'm going to put them in at the same time. Otherwise, you could stagger a little bit. You don't put any oil in your water. Only idiots do that. You do salt it, and you put all the meatballs are in here. There's like 54 meatballs out of the 3 pounds. And it's cooking on slow. It'll simmer. I'll turn it off in about 10 minutes or so. I did add a can of tomato paste in there because all the fresh tomatoes and all the juices from the fresh tomatoes made it a little bit thin. So, and that's why you have tomato paste. So there you go. So we're about to have Big Daddy's meat the balls. And this is what you end up with. Outstanding. Yummy.